Hi, I'm Dr. Nana Atokatha Ashman Brew, and you're listening to The Switch. In this episode, we're diving into one of the most crucial aspects of any business: client experience. It's not just about delivering a service, it's about creating lasting impressions, building trust, and fostering relationships that stand the test of time. I had the privilege of sitting down with one of my colleagues, Sidney Abrams, or Sid as we like to call him, our Chief Client Experience Officer, to explore the art and science behind what makes a truly exceptional client experience. We talked about the strategies, philosophies, and intentional actions that have shaped our journey in this space, and how those lessons continue to impact the work we do every day. Whether you're a leader, a practitioner, or simply someone curious about what it takes to craft meaningful relationships, this episode is packed with insights, practical advice, and a little inspiration. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Hey, Sid, thank you so much for being with us on The Switch. It's a joy considering you're our Chief Client Experience Officer. And for folks who are listening in who are not sure of what that means, can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about our client experience. So I will start by saying client experience was brand new to me. I took on this role at the end of 2022, having spent 2 years in business development before that. And when I was asked to take on this role, I said, sure. Oh, what is that? And so I immersed myself into a winter break of learning and reading and just really trying to understand what that world is. And there's a lot of complexity around what client experience is. But for me, particularly so I could understand it as a new professional, and so I could then help to socialize it within the organization, I really wanted to start simple. I wanted to create a framework that we could build upon, right? Just start with a solid foundation, really center things around the client. I think we sometimes in professional services make it all about ourselves, but at the end of the day, it's about the client. And if we could flip the script and how we think about things and how we solution the work that we do, that to me was going to make every engagement easy, effortless, and impactful.
Wow. And I want to come back to vision, like what your vision is for client experience when you took on the role. But first, I think it would also be helpful for our listeners to understand the trajectory of your career. You've been with us for such a long time, right? I don't want to make you sound old, but you are one of our longest tenured employees. Can you share with our listeners what that's looked like for you?
Absolutely. And I really feel that all of the roles that I've had have set me up for success in this role. So I started off in 2008 when we had 7 or 8 employees as a senior consultant in our HR outsourcing team. And I was on client sites 3 to 4 days a week, being their internal HR leader. I did that for a number of years and decided at one point that I wanted to come out of day-to-day work and really focus more on short-term projects as opposed to longer-term engagements. And I was offered that opportunity. So I started doing HR assessments and audits and writing handbooks and some of the other projects that we do as a firm. Did that for a number of years.
That's the nitty gritty.
Oh, absolutely. It was in the weeds, but it really gave me a strong foundation, honestly, for understanding the work that our staff do every day. And I feel very comfortable saying I was in your shoes. I know what you've been through. That helps me, I think, have that credibility. And then our staff have the confidence we're bringing that sort of perspective to the conversations. I did 2 years in business development, as I mentioned. So really being able to talk with HR leaders and nonprofit executives about the challenges they're facing within their organizations from a people perspective, and how do we craft solutions that enable them to address those issues. It was an interesting time in that I took on that role in the fall of 2020, 6 months into the pandemic. So that was being new to business development, doing it all over Zoom as we're doing this interview. And I found that while sales was new to me, I feel because I had been in the HR space for so many years that I was just talking HR with other executives and the solutions would ultimately identify themselves. So I think all of that led to the ability for me to step into this client experience role to understand the client's views, our staff's views, and put a program together that, as you and I talked about in the very beginning of that journey, creating our North Star. What was it that we were going to put out there as, I don't want to call it a goal because that's too simplified, but what do we aspire to do, right? What do we aspire to be from a client experience standpoint? And what we talked about was really, it has to become embedded in our culture.
Yeah.
Right? We have to have client centricity, right? That's what I talked about earlier about centering the client that ultimately allows us to drive measurable positive outcomes for our clients. We know that with elevated and best people practices and a focus on organization, talent, and culture, our clients will be able to have greater impact in the important communities in which they serve.
Yeah, and I do want to get to some of those communities that our clients serve, the broadness of our client community as a whole over the years. But I do want to get back to your vision. And I wonder, has that vision clarified since you've taken on a role? You sort of talked about where your mind was at the beginning. How has that crystallized?
It very much has, as I gained more confidence in doing the work and we began to see results. One of the first things we had to do was to educate our staff. Once I felt comfortable that I knew what client experience was and our leadership knew and our executives were bought into that, we had to then go about educating our staff on what client experiences were. We had to help them to overcome any misperceptions that they would have had about client experience. We had to make the business case for why client experience and investing in it was such an important mandate for us as a firm. And then we had to lay out a roadmap. We had to kind of map out our journey over a 1 to 2 year period for all of the different initiatives and projects that we would be sequencing that would allow us to move along that client experience.
I mean, I really appreciate what you're saying because there's the work, and then you were mentioning your confidence at doing the work, and also just not having a predecessor. It was a brand new role. But I love also what you were talking about earlier in terms of the different roles that you played. So you know how multifaceted our engagements are. So integrating multiple practices across HR and talent management consulting is no easy feat. How have you managed to ensure consistency in the client experience despite the complexity?
And that's such a great topic. And frankly, it was probably one of the biggest challenges that we faced coming in. We had at that time 5 business units or 5 different teams of folks who were supporting clients in different ways, doing work in 5 different ways. All of them were right individually. However, when you think about a consistent experience from the client, particularly for those clients that we had working with multiple practices, I'll give you a great example. When I first took on this role, part of what we did was a client listening tour, and I'm sure we'll get into more of that later. But one very memorable comment one of our clients in New York City made when I was up visiting with her was that she had a kind of what we call a cross-business unit engagement. So she was working with multiple teams on different work streams. And at the end of that work, she had 3 different deliverables with 3 different looks and feels from those 3 different consultants across 3 business units. We wanted to create an opportunity to be more consistent with how a client experiences. So we did a couple of basic things, right? As you know, we partnered together to create a standardized proposal template and the proposal content that a prospective client will see. We created templates for our client project deliverables. None of these were really difficult in and of themselves, but it required us to step back, put ourselves in our client's shoes, and when we wanted to ask them how they wanted to experience working with us. So it's that consistency and amalgamation of little things that all make for that better experience.
And I know that Client Savvy, as an external partner, has played a huge role in this experience. Before we get into that, how did our collaboration begin with Client Savvy?
They are the gold standard of partners when it comes to client experience. One of our former staff members actually identified Client Savvy as a potential partner before I took on this role. So I was really thrilled that some of that legwork had been done. I will say that our work with Client Savvy has been transformative in terms of the methodology and the approach and the science that we've taken to client experience, introducing a whole new language that has been out there and has been kind of tested across professional services. They helped us to identify, for example, what the roadmap might look like. What are the universe of CX projects that we could undertake? Ultimately, it was up to us to determine the sequence of them, which ones we wanted to take on, which ones we felt that we could tackle while doing the work concurrently. But they were our partner. They were the ones who were standing side by side with us and helping us along the way. So they introduced to us concepts like doing a baseline survey of our clients. And we took both online surveys as well as in-person interviews with clients to really understand their perceptions of working with us. Were we easy to work with? Did they feel that they got the value from those experiences? Did the outcomes match the expectations set during the business development phase? Were we easy to contract and invoice? All the little things. Just a treasure trove of data that we could then use that to create the roadmap around what were the different initiatives that we'd be putting in place over time.
What I particularly love being a part of that early process with you was how you engaged staff at all levels across the firm for their input as well to help shape what we were going to be doing. It might sound as if this was an easy thing to accomplish, but it took some time and there were many people involved. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely, there were. And thank you for raising that because that's really an important perspective. Not only the client side, but really it's the employee side as well, right? We call that here employee experience. And everything we do has to be centered in CX and EX. And what we did was just like we interviewed our clients with gaining their perspective around working with us, we interviewed and spoke with our staff, not the specifics about working with the clients, but what do they need to best show up? What sort of training do they need? What sort of resources and templates do they need? How do we leverage technology? Because now we were a 100% distributed workforce across 25 plus states. How could we leverage technology to create that seamlessness, that connectivity that allowed them to function cohesively and impactfully with our clients? So we were able to glean topics such as how do we create a project management methodology with our clients? How do we create standardized templates and tools that we could be much more efficient with our time? How do we draft correspondences that could then be templatized and customized for our clients? Again, it's not anything really complex, but they're all really important little things that when you add them together, certainly it's 1 + 1 = 6 here.
Now you're winning gold level client experience award with Client Savvy, which is a huge achievement. What does this recognition mean for us and what steps were critical in reaching this milestone?
It's a wonderful achievement, and it's an absolute testament to the work that our teams put in every single day. To be honest, I don't want to sound redundant here, but it's not about us. It's a reflection of how we've been able to show up for our clients, how we have set and met their expectations, and how our work enables them to be more impactful. If it wasn't for the testimonials and the feedback that came from our clients, this award wouldn't even be possible. And I will also say that it's by no means the end. In fact, I think it's just an affirmation that we're off to a good start on our CX journey. I think we have to continue centering the client each and every day and with each and every interaction that our teams have with them. And like I said before, it really is all about the small things that are going to help us to gradually move that needle, which went from nothing in the beginning, we were just starting, to where we are now with this gold award. And I know there are greater achievements that we know will lie ahead as well.
Yeah, but we're going to celebrate this one right now. And, specifically regarding the social impact sector, nonprofits and associations have unique challenges. We know that HR is not just HR when it comes to HR operations inside of nonprofits. How have we tailored our client experience to meet those specific needs of mission-driven organizations?
How I like to think about that is really through a lens of art and science. We talk about HR has both, and I think the science of HR, the compliance, the actual recruitment, the onboarding, the benefits administration, the payroll, that's ubiquitous. I don't think it matters what specific industry you're in. You might have some different federal requirements based on your size or some state requirements. You may have some unique nuances. What we feel that we've created is an experience for our clients that capture the art of talent management. How do nonprofits recruit and identify talent that are mission focused? Once these organizations hire talent, how do we create a compensation strategy and approach that we know is often budget limited, whether it be through funding or fundraising or whatever mechanism that still motivates employees, that is still defensible through a budget process, right? That has to, be very board driven, and that ultimately allows us to help clients create a culture that will retain their top talent. It goes back to the direct correlation that we know exists between an organization's people practices and their outcome. It doesn't matter if it's community outcomes, patient outcomes, member outcomes, whatever they may be. If we can create that right magic and that right synergy between all of the art and sciences, that's where we feel we're able to thrive and our clients can also thrive.
Yeah, and you just touched on some of the subsectors in the social impact sector. Can you just share a little bit about our client community to help those who are listening understand the types of missions that we serve?
What a rich diversity of clients we work with, as you know. Everything from the arts and sciences to the environment to human and racial and social justice to professional societies and trade associations through foundations and organizations that help the food insecure to international NGOs. We work with an incredibly rich diversity of clients that span the full continuum of the nonprofit sector. At the end of the day, it really is about the impact. I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record in talking about that, but that's so important for us as how we center our work. It's just worth reiterating. All that to say, our client base is incredibly diverse. They do such important work. And part of that, I think what I love to tell people when we are doing interviewing and hiring people, particularly those who have come out of the nonprofit sector, is that when you work for a association or a social impact nonprofit or a community organization, you can go really deep and impact that one mission. Whereas when you work with us, you go broad and you might support 6 different organizations at any one time in 6 different missions. The impact of your work is so much more exponential.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely important for me, having worked for nonprofits throughout my career and being able to work for and serve 300 plus missions is incredible. And I know that number is just like exponential when we think about the years of impact, as you mentioned. Thank you for that. We've supported organizations at all sizes. Organizations in the nonprofit space, they're growing in complexity and size as well. And so we've been able to shore up our services and scale up so that we can support those larger organizations as well.
That's right. That's right. I think there's a misperception out there that nonprofits are not businesses. They are just as much of a business as any for-profit enterprise out there. It's simply a matter of their tax status. And you're right. We have worked with the tiniest of nonprofits coming out of fiscal sponsorship, and they have 2 employees, all the way up through, ones that have 10,000 or more. And the ability for us to craft solutions as we have grown as a firm has followed kind of that linear path of working from small nonprofits, doing a lot of handbooks and policies and hiring. When we first started out 25 years ago, being a DC-centric firm, to today being a national recognized presence that is able to essentially identify solutions that can meet an organization wherever they are in their maturity and size.
Inside of that, is this whole concept of client feedback. We know that client feedback plays a vital role in shaping our own strategy. Can you share examples of how feedback has helped to improve our services?
I sure can. And the client feedback program that we've initiated 15 months ago, which is now fully up and running, has been transformative for us in providing just a amazing pool of data to pull from. Let me give a little bit of a background on what our client feedback program looks like today. Through our partnership with Client Savvy, we have created a mechanism that each of our clients will receive anywhere from 3 to 6 online surveys that mirror their journey with us from business development all the way through final implementation. So a client might see a survey during the business development process. Once the project has been awarded and we have a kickoff call, we'll send a survey then to understand how well we began the engagement. Do they have confidence? Does it match the expectations set during business development? Depending on the length of the engagement, we'll have 1 or more kind of mid-engagement touch points that we call those. So those are surveys perhaps every 60 or 90 days that ensure where we are tracking with expectations. We'll always do a survey at the end of our engagement, whatever was contracted, and then often we'll do one 90 days post-engagement to really be able to measure the impact of our work. So clients will get these surveys throughout the course of their life cycle with us. The surveys take about 2 to 3 minutes to complete. They are not anonymous, so we are very intentional about creating accountability and honesty and authenticity and transparency around the feedback given. And for us, we use these surveys as conversation starters. I think there are some who take data and they collect it and they never do anything with it. For us, that's the beginning of the process, right? We use that feedback, whether it be positive, constructive, or somewhere in between, maybe sometimes both, to have conversations with our project teams to allow them to respond and react to that feedback. The data shows that if you take a client who is unhappy with their experience and we can turn that experience into a positive one, 400% more likely to return or to share information about, whoever it is you're working with another peer. For us, that's been really important. When we went live with our full survey program, we began to capture that data. And over the last 2 all staff meetings, we've started to share some of that very intentionally with our staff. We took a quantitative approach and we shared a lot of kind of numbers and data and charts and graphs about what our feedback from the clients said. And what they told us was that on a scale of 1 to 7, our average score was 5.2, which is above average. It exceeded expectations. So across dozens of surveys and hundreds of responses, we averaged and exceeded expectations. So that was a great start. We also asked them NPS questions to understand if they would be willing to share information or refer.
And NPS being Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter Score, that's correct. And our scores were 3 times higher than they were when we did our baseline survey. So we know that the things that we've been putting in place have worked. And then we were able to, through that data, compare ourselves to other organizations. And through the Client Savvy dashboard, their platform, we can break the data down in so many different ways. You can look at it by engagement type, by client, by region, by headcount, by budget size. We have lots of different ways of slicing and dicing the data. But what I felt was actually more impactful was during the second meeting, we shared much more qualitative feedback with our staff. We actually pulled direct quotes that came from surveys that both were opportunities to give kudos to our staff, to share examples of how we have positively made impact with our clients. We shared in a redacted way constructive feedback where we may have missed the mark and opportunities to course correct. Using these as conversation starters, particularly in that last category, I'll just read 1 or 2 quotes if that's okay about thing that a client may have said that said to us, oh, there's an additional opportunity to deepen that relationship there. So I'm just going to read from a quote here. It said, "We've been moving so fast, I haven't had the chance to think about how to better utilize. I would appreciate some thought partnership around this." Or another quote for a client, which was an outsourcing client, where they said, "Our staff has been reduced to a point where outsourced HR isn't necessary. We'd absolutely re-engage once that changes." So that gives us an opportunity to flag in 3 months or in 6 months to return to that client. And if there's an opportunity to re-engage there, we will. Clients will tell us, things like we're looking to now implement some of the recommendations that may have come from an assessment, or we have hiring needs in Q1 of next year. And that gives us a chance to reach out a few months in advance to say, hey, are you looking for an opportunity to either leverage a retained search or perhaps recruit an outsourcing as a way to fill those critical roles. So just the amount of data that we capture is so vast, it requires us to spend a good amount of time actually filtering through it, communicating back to our clients, and it's created a great opportunity for us just to deepen the relationships that our consultants build every day with the clients that we work with.
Love it. You talked about client feedback and getting that constructive feedback as well. What I particularly love about the approach with Client Savvy that you took was just taking the time to understand internally all feedback is good feedback. That requires psychological adjustment because who wants to welcome feedback, especially when others can see that feedback? What are your thoughts around that? How long do you think it took us to move through that concept of more feedback and feedback being good feedback?
Oh, that is a journey in and of itself. It has taken us time to socialize this enough with our staff and to provide concrete examples of how we use the feedback for folks to feel confident. I'll be honest, there was a question that came up when we first put this in place that somebody said, hey, is this going to go into my performance evaluation? And the answer is it absolutely will be considered just the same way that a client can pick up the phone and call us, or the client can pick up a phone and call another client and say, hey, we don't want you to work with them. Or the client can call us and say, hey, you did an amazing job and here's the impact of that work. All feedback is good feedback, as you said. We're just creating another opportunity or another vehicle for us to provide that to our clients. So we just need to make sure we're positioning our staff for success. We are having an open dialogue to ask the questions. Tell me about this engagement. Tell me about this particular part of an engagement. Let's understand and unpack what happened and how do we both as a consultant, but then as a firm, how do we learn from it? How do we evaluate the feedback to say, hey, we did everything that we know we could have. We did things the way that our methodology dictates. We pivoted in how we needed to do it to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward. And when there are opportunities to learn from feedback, we absolutely do it. I guarantee with every engagement, something always happens. For us, it's about how do we take those lessons learned, celebrate the ways in which we've adapted to them, and then teach and educate the rest of the consultants about whatever it is that we learned. And by the way, this came from constructive feedback. It was all about a learning opportunity. So the more we do it, the more confidence our staff gain.
Is it a lot, I'm not going to use the word easier, but perhaps there's a stronger ability to move the ball forward when you're in a trust-based culture?
Yes. And there is no doubt that the work that we've done over the years to build that trust has enabled this program to be successful. Without that, I guarantee you, we would probably not have even put this program in place, knowing that without that foundation, right? I think about it like building a house, right? That trust-based culture that we have built and carefully curated over 24 years is the rebar, right? That is the concrete. That is the foundation of our infrastructure on which everything else may sit, right? We can do all of these new programs and initiatives and putting ourselves out there the way that many don't because we do have that strong foundation.
I'm so grateful in terms of being a trust-based culture and one that has consistently had an open feedback culture as well. So thank you for that. With all the clients that we have and our focus on client experience, how do we ensure that our clients are getting personalized attention and care?
So that, I believe, starts with how a client engages with us during business development. We don't sell any off-the-shelf kind of package solutions that, everybody gets forced into a product A, B, or C. Almost everything that we sell is highly customized, created for the unique needs of a client because no two organizations, for-profit or nonprofit, will ever have the exact same needs. So why should your solutions be the same? So we create that bespoke experience starting at business development. Then once an engagement begins, right, we are very open to tell us about how your organization will be impacted if the goals that you set for this program are achieved. We want our clients to dream a little bit during the beginning of the engagement, which helps us then to really articulate in a way without asking them specifically, what is it you want to do here and why? What is your organization going to achieve? How will your impact be affected? How will your staff be engaged differently, for example, through the course of this work? And through that, then we create that very specific project plan that is built around what that client has articulated during our kickoff process. We have the templates, we have a lot of the tools that have been crafted over 25 years of doing this work that we then are able to highly customize for a culture of a advocacy organization, which might be very different from a trade association. They speak in the same language, but they use different words. And we want to be very responsive. And it's a very silly example of how the customization works for each of our clients.
And I know earlier you mentioned 18-month or 15-month journey for a client experience, but I did want to revisit that for the Net Promoter Score. We've been doing those for years, right? We used to sit and customize those surveys for years. I mean, my question to you is, why was it necessary to go beyond just the NPS?
I think the NPS provides a good point in time reflection of how a client feels about their experience with you. But we know that those feelings that our clients have, because we're selling feelings, they change over time. So we want to capture a wide variety of data that allows us to understand beyond whether a client will recommend us to somebody, right? That's the gold standard measure that was created so many years ago. But we like to ask things about, do you have confidence in working with the consultants that you feel will help drive to the outcomes you desire? Did we set expectations appropriately? Did we then meet those expectations? Did we align with the budget that you had outlined for the project? Did we meet the timeline? So we like to capture more micro data as well that allow us to think about how we build project teams, how we set milestones at the beginning of an engagement, how do we price our engagements to be more budget responsive. So I think NPS is one important measure, but it's not the only measure.
Though we won a gold level award, that is definitely a tangible result. How long did it take before we saw tangible improvements in the client experience strategy? And what indicators would you say were most meaningful?
What was most meaningful was actually the percentage of completes on the surveys. When we first did our baseline, we were 10, 11, 12%. 85 to 90% of these surveys were either not being opened, they might be going to junk mail, they might be ignored. It was telling me that the client did not feel enough value in 3 minutes to complete that.
I was going to ask you, what does it mean when that was, so low like that?
Exactly. And right now, I mean, even just looking into our portal, we're at like 60% in some cases, right? Every month's a little bit different. We have a tremendous response rate from our clients, which tells us that they feel it's important and confident in us to take that time. So for us, that to me is the most meaningful part of the data.
And how does that percentage of responses that we have right now align with what's in the market?
I would say that in respect to the percent completes, I have heard that anywhere from 25 to 35 is considered strong. So when I see a month where we have over 60%, I know we're doing something right. Now that's going to average out and it's going to wane over time, but to see that even in one particular month was very, very affirming to us. I mean, if I look back just over the last 3 months, we have sent out 471 surveys to our nearly 300 clients that we're working with at different points in their engagement. So when you think about just looking at right here, our dashboard, we have 471 requests, 413 projects, and 329 clients. If you just take each of that at a micro level and then think about the aggregation of that data, it's unbelievable what we can do from this.
It's really difficult to listen to that number of clients without an instrument like Client Savvy.
Oh, it would be nearly impossible. Sure, there are survey tools available on the market. For a firm like Client Savvy, who that's all they do is create opportunities for us to be able to engage with our client to get this meaningful feedback. Yes, it's a financial investment and it's a time investment, but it has paid for itself in spades.
What I mean in particular is just leveraging technology for listening. That's just a lot of opportunity there with that number of clients. So it's so great that, as we continue to grow, we have, that foundation now to continue scaling up in how we listen and when we listen.
Absolutely. And as you hear in so many other contexts, it's about that personalization of the experience and creating the ability for the client to respond where, when, and how they want to. They can do it over their mobile phone. We can actually do a survey. If somebody wanted to get on the phone, we could call them on the phone and talk to them and walk them through the survey and fill it out as if they were to do it themselves, or they can do it sitting at their desktop. So we've created that opportunity for them to be able to respond, again, in that client-centric way, in the way that makes the most sense for them.
I know we talked about vision already, but I do want to talk about your thoughts on looking ahead and the future of client experience, especially as it pertains to nonprofits. What do you see?
We are just at the beginning of our journey. We've put the mechanisms in place to be able to capture and record feedback, and we've spent a good amount of time talking about that. But for us, it's about how do we continue to elevate the talent management strategies that our nonprofit clients need to be able to compete in their marketplace, because there is competition, right? You've got multiple organizations providing very similar services in a community or a city or a state, for example. There is still a quote unquote war for talent. Nonprofits have to find every advantage they can to be able to compete. So whether it's creating their culture, whether it's through strong policies, whether it's through developmental opportunities provided to their staff, whether it's through making sure they are promoting equity and inclusion and a sense of belonging amongst their folks, whether it's creating strong compensation practices and making sure that their pay is equitable and competitive and that their benefits are strong. All these things enable us to be able to impact the work that they're doing, which for us, again, is that North Star that we've had. So to me, client experience is all about how do we create sustainability and a strong talent infrastructure for the organizations that we're working with.
It's hard not to feel excited when you talk about client experience.
It is. It's like a high you get when talking about the work that we do. I think that's part of why we've remained such a strong presence within the sector over 25 years, why we've been able to grow tenfold in terms of the number of staff that we have and probably 100-fold in terms of the number of clients that we've worked with, because we know that good work gets good work.
If you could give one piece of advice to a company or even a nonprofit starting to focus heavily on client experience or community experience, what would it be?
My one piece of advice is to take the plunge. Don't be afraid of client experience. Don't be afraid of community experience. You have to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to ask for the feedback, because you will only grow from what you learn. I think there is a strong correlation between client experience and all of your stakeholder engagement. If you think about the business that you operate, you've got so many different stakeholders. Yes, you've got your staff, and we spent a lot of time talking about the impact on your staff, but you've got a board of directors, you've got funders, you've got community agencies, you've got government oversight and regulation, you've got other community partners you have to play nicely in the sandbox with, right? All of these are synergistically connected. None of these stand independent. If you have an area where it's weak in one area, it is going to impact the others, right? But if you can have that strong approach to the way you do your work, the way in which you engage with your various stakeholders, and the way in which you show up every day, that's what client experience is about.
Wow. I just want to personally thank you for that work that you've done for our client community. It has made a significant difference. And I know, as you mentioned, we're just at the beginning. There's so much more to do and so much farther to go. Just really appreciate this conversation that we've had, exploring just a little bit of it. So thank you, Sid, for your time. And I'm excited about what's next for client experience.
Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this conversation. Look forward to talking with anybody who has any questions about our journey or what your journey might look like.
That's the end of this episode, and I hope you enjoyed this insightful conversation with Sid Abrams as much as I did. Exploring the art and science of client experience is a journey that challenges us to think differently, act intentionally, and always put our people at the center of everything we do. If today's discussion sparked any new ideas or reflections, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out, share your thoughts, or let us know how you're creating exceptional client experiences in your own work. Until next time, take care and keep creating positive change, one client experience at a time.